conducting the memorial lectures since last 6 years, and at the same time, here, in fact, we had to do this on December 4th itself. Due to some unavoidable circumstances, we had to postpone this lecture program. And we are conducting today with the support of our university and also Professor Ram Reddy Memorial Trust. So this time we have invited chief guest and the main speaker of this memorial lecture program, Professor Bashir Chatterjee, Director of Simca, Government of London, and we thought that you will be the most suitable person in the transitory and transformative stage of the 2-year system of the road in our country. And he is going to speak on very interesting topic, that is ODI and education 4.0. So, apart from this, we are also very happy today because of the presence and participation of our honorable special guest, Pramila Ram Reddy ji, and also Jyoti, daughter of Professor Ram Reddy, and also on behalf of us, our beloved teacher, Professor Yargopal, is also here on dais. And we are continuously getting support from the Memorial Trust to organize this program since last more than 6 years. And at the same time, most of our senior faculty members, retired professors are also here, Professor Garu and Professor Kataya, Professor Mansoor Reddy and others are also here. And they are also taking considerable interest in organizing this program. And apart from this, our Director Academic, Dr. Chakrapani, Jispa, Dr. Indian Reddy, and heads of the branches of the various divisions and faculty members, students, and research scholars. They are also very actively participating in this program. So it is not only program is delayed, and at the same time, today's program is also delayed. For that, having for this, and since we have time is our constraint, I don't take much of the time, and I go with the proceed with the items of the agenda. Now I request Professor Gopal to briefly introduce both the trust and programs and the in future how to have a collaboration with the trust to continue this program, not only the memorial lecture and other various programs. They have also a plan to have a continuous collaboration with our university. In that aspect also, I request him to brief us what we can do in the future about the various activities. Professor, in memorial to our honorable great educational leader, Professor Ram Reddy, and founder of the. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Sir Sitaram Rao, Vice Chancellor of the Medical University, Professor Bashir Ji, the chief guest of this morning, Professor Chakrapani, a very close friend of ours, and Professor Reddy, the responsibility of literally running the university. Mrs. Ram Reddy, she is, I'm addressing her as Pramila Ram Reddy, but for all of us, she is Amma. So most of Professor Ram Reddy's students would address her as Amma because she was a great host. If you had gone to meet Professor Ram Reddy in his house, she was a very warm host. You can't forget how many times we had the food in their house. And Professor Ram Reddy used to introduce me after he became IGNOU Vice Chancellor. He is my academic son. Always was extremely happy that he considered me as his academic son. And Jyoti, who is also a very close and intimate friend of ours, and members of faculty, staff, and friends. Professor G. Ram Reddy Memorial Trust was launched immediately after sudden and unexpected demise of Professor Ram Reddy. And all of us thought at that point of time that his memory should be perpetuated largely because succeeding generations should know that here was a person, an extraordinary person, who not only was an exceptional human being, because I had the long association with him, both as a student in post-graduation. He was my research scholar, de facto research scholar. Then we were co-authors and we worked 5 years together as a part of the Center for Economic and Social Studies. Now, this long association has not only an impact on my intellectual life, but on my personality, the makeup of my personality, because he was one of the very inspiring role models as a human being. He was a very humane person, very unusual. And he carried power in a very light way. He never felt that he was in power. We used to have sometimes discussion, although I was his student, that I used to sometimes make very critical comments. And he would feel embarrassed, but he would reflect. And then he would say, maybe you are right. That's the type of freedom as a student I enjoyed with him later part of her life. Now he was a person, apart from being an extremely humane, because when we were students in the hostel, Professor Ram Reddy would come to our room. He was our warden. So he would come sometimes. I still remember that we were in the room and he walked in. And he made a comment that the class is at 9 o'clock. You have to shave and take bath. In other words, he was saying you should shave every day. And then, he had a knack of communicating certain things. And of course, later we became colleagues in Warangal. For almost 3-4 years, he was our head of department. Then, of course, he came to Hyderabad. Then he became Vice Chancellor of Usman University. I should also share a joke that he used to tell that when I go to God, I'll ask God, I'll argue with him. I should go to heaven. I'm qualified to go to heaven because I suffered enough of hell by being Vice Chancellor of University. This was a very interesting comment he used to make. Then, of course, I don't think there is any academic in India who had set 2 universities. He was the founder Vice Chancellor of 2 universities. Then he also brought ISSR regional centers all over the country. He thought that power should not be concentrated in Delhi. That's how ISSR regional center. He also brought UGC regional centers. When he was UGC chairman, he thought too much of power is concentrated. People have to travel long distance. The UGC should be accessible. Therefore, 4 or 5 regional centers were set. He was a Democrat. His doctorate was on decentralization, and he was also a practitioner of decentralization. Of course, Open University has study centers all over. Even today, you have those centers, even after bifurcation in the other part of the state. Now, when the Memorial Trust was set, of course, the chairman was Professor C.H. Hanumantrao, a renowned economist, and he was the Farmer Planning Commission chairman. He was the director of Institute of Economic Growth, and he was chairman of a Labour Commission. He had very high work, but both of them were school and classmates in graduation also. In fact, they would say that sometimes they would sit in the same jail and they come from the same district. So C.H. Hanumantrao accepted the chairmanship and I became the secretary. I must confess that I don't think the trust has done justice to Professor Ram Reddy and his contributions in leveraging the education system of India. We feel a little guilty. But what was possible, we have organized his memorial lectures. If you look at who is who of India, I think you will find maybe about 15 to 20 people gave Professor Ram Reddy memorial lecture. Then almost it became difficult to find a person to give the memorial lecture. Then we thought that the best place to conduct the memorial lectures is this institution which is founded, and this institution has a lot of gratitude. Other institutions, IGNOU perhaps remembers him, but UGC, etc. There I don't know whatever time is spent. Right, to build them. But both IGNOU and Ambedkar University, both the universities remember him. And this memorial lecture, they also had a similar program. So we entered into some sort of understanding, and we thought trust and Open University should organize this memorial lecture. In the meanwhile, we also introduced the Best Social Scientist Award, Young Social Scientist Award, in the areas of Professor Ram Reddy's interest. Because in his life, his entire work was on Panchayat Raj, and we also have done on decentralization because we were students. And then, of course, his interest was in public policy, in the Department of Political Science, then distance education. So we thought any young scholar making substantial contribution to any one of these areas should be awarded less than 45 years, because we thought he has another 20, 30 years to go. So recognition, if it is given at a very young age, that sustains the intellectual, in the person or intellectual life of the person, because early recognition sometimes, makes people to work harder. But even that ran into a bit of trouble, because I moved from Hyderabad to Bangalore, and with the result, that award, and Professor Radha Krishna, who used to be the chairman of this committee, he passed away, and now we are planning. I don't think I am disclosing any confidential matter, but we are having an initial dialogue with the administration of Open University, particularly with the Vice Chancellor, because Vice Chancellor of this university happens to be a student of ours. That was perhaps the last batch I taught before I moved to Hyderabad at Warangal. He was also a student of Professor V.S. Prasad, who was NAC director. Of course, he also occupied many high positions. We were classmates, Professor Prasad and myself. So we thought, and Professor Hanumantrao also said, that life of an individual is shorter.
but the life of an institution is much longer. So it does, the life of an institution is not limited to persons. Life of an institution is linked to the memory and continuity. And obviously, if you give the responsibility to an institution, it's the right place to perpetuate the memory of Professor Ram Reddy. And hopefully, we will enter into and this award, which have been given to young social scientists. We also expect if once we enter into some understanding, the university itself will award, trust may be broadly associated. And Jyoti has some ideas that how to take the message of education or democratic values to a larger section of the society. We are also considering, because she is deeply concerned with the marginalized sections of the society. And the message of change has to reach larger masses. And next time when we conduct this meeting, perhaps we would have moved much closer. Trust and university would have moved closer. And I hope all of you would approve if we enter into some understanding, and also enthusiastically support, partly because of our gratitude to Professor Ram Reddy, partly because of his substantial contribution, partly because to further the cause of education. Because today education has to be democratized. I was telling to Professor Bashirji that today the aspiration for higher education has gone up enormously. Never in the history of India, the poorer sections parents thought that their children should be educated. First time, a major change is taking place in the very psyche of the ecosystem of India, that they want their education children because that provides social mobility. And formal system is not able to provide that type of, the demand, are able to meet the demand, because we admit 30, 40 students in post-graduation, and it's very difficult. And Open University perhaps is the right institution, partly to meet the demand, and regular system will meet the demand. This imagination Professor Ram Reddy had. When he was the birth of idea, I was telling him, the birth of idea, I've seen the birth of idea. He was the Vice Chancellor of Usman University. Sometimes he's a little free, he would call me. So we would sit, and then he would say that, how would it be if there is some open learning system? Now I would say, sir, no, it won't work. Because the experience we had with the distant correspondence courses. Correspondence courses became milching cow of the formal institution. They have, they would not pay any attention, and they collect a lot of money from and that became a resource. And every vice chancellor looked at distance education as a source of income, not as a opportunity for the marginalized or second choice, as Professor Ram Reddy says, the second choice for those who miss in the bus. So I think, but I used to say, sir, education through distance will not make, because teacher presence, role of the teacher, some of the teachers are inspiring, all this thing. But he would say that demand for the education is growing up, and technology is exploding, it is advancing very fast. I think, Bashirji, perhaps you have to reflect that now technology with the artificial intelligence, a lot of debate is going on. But we do not know where technology will lead us. Because recently there was a news, I don't know whether you have seen, in South Korea, a robot was working. In the, it was putting the big boxes on the conveyor belt. And one person went there, he thought he was there also a box. He took him and put on the conveyor belt. And he died. Because when he entered into the narrow lane of the conveyor belt, he died. And the robot did not know he was a human being. He thought it was also one of the object. He just picked him up and threw on the conveyor belt. So I think, this part of the technology, one has to be very careful, but technology is exploding. And what artificial intelligence will do, we do not know. But definitely distance education stands to gain with the technological advancement, provided we build some checks into the system itself. And I hope that Open University will grow into a much larger system, and it also helps in democratizing system, social mobility, transformation of the society. And we are happy and proud to be a part of this process. Again, I thank Open University on behalf of Professor G. Ram Reddy Memorial Trust for accepting, for conducting this program. And we, on behalf of the trust, feel happy and convey our compliments, also gratitudes to the Vice Chancellor and to the faculty and to all of you. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much, sir, for your detailed presentation about the Memorial Trust and its future activities. Now I request our Director Academics, Professor Chakrapani, to introduce the chief guest.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, all. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K. Sitaram Rao garu, President of today's function, and the Chief Guest, Professor Bashir Ahmad Shedraji, and Guest of Honor, Professor G. Hargopal garu, and Registrar A.V.N. Reddy garu, Professor Venkaya garu, and family members of Professor G. Ram Reddy garu, and teachers, non-teaching staff, and research scholars, students. As Professor Hargopal said, it always gives a pleasure and honor to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University to celebrate Professor G. Ram Reddy's birthday, as well as continuing his legacy. In continuation of that, this time we have invited a person who is really looking the future of distance education, ODL, at a different level. As he rightly put the title to his lecture, it is Distance Education 4.0. So now we are talking about 2.0. Now he is going to project how we can make higher education to next, take higher education to next level. Just my role is to introduce today's chief guest, Professor Shedraji. I can tell Professor Shedraji is a very kind friend of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. Not just Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, of course, entire country's ODL, open and distance learning systems. And he is trying to give a new direction to ODL institutions with technology and further artificial intelligence also, because he is expert in both from ODL to artificial intelligence. While just referring about his background and all, I was surprised to see he was alumni of Andhra University. And he started his career from Andhra University as a library science student there. And he pursued his post-graduation in library science. And he earned his PhD from UK. And then, if you look at his 35-year plus career, he worked with almost all the agencies internationally, at least 20-25 different countries on different platforms and different issues. Before reading his formal biodata, I'd like to bring to your notice, this is the 7th lecture of Professor G. Ram Reddy garu. in collaboration with G. Ram Reddy, Professor G. Ram Reddy Memorial Trust. So far, we have invited several social scientists, of course, academicians, and education leaders to deliver these lectures. Since 2016, we are doing this. And the first lecture was delivered. We do this, on birthday of Professor G. Ram Reddy, that is December 4th, every year. The first lecture was delivered by Professor Rajan Velukar, then Dr. Vaidyanathan Iyer, Farkhan Kamar, Professor D. N. Reddy Garu, Professor Vinay Kumar Pathak, and Professor V. S. Prasad. This is now Professor Shadrak is here to deliver 7th lecture of Professor G. Ram Reddy. This time we have invited Professor Shadrak, who is currently serving the Commonwealth of Education Media Center, SEMCA, New Delhi. All of you know, SEMCA is international UNESCO part of UNESCO, and it is intergovernmental organization. The regional center is in Delhi. Now he is in this position. He oversees programs that enhance quality learning and access to education and skill development in Asia. He is also identified as an expert by the Global Partnership of Artificial Intelligence, GPAI, in work programs related to future of work and artificial intelligence in education. Previously, Professor Shadrak has been a consultant to UNESCO, UNIVAC for building innovation and learning in TVET. This is vocational training program with the support from German Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training and German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. Professor Shadrak, in his career since 1986, has managed ICT 4D lifelong learning programs in over 40 nations around the world. He has also served in senior management position at British Council, Transparency International Germany, and One World International UK. He helped the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to establish the Indian Public Library Movement and the International Network of Emerging Library Innovators program in South Asia. He was also the Asia coordinator of Sir Jim Berners-Lee's World Wide Web Foundation for its Alliance for Affordable Internet program. He served as the Global Chief Executive of Telecenter.org Foundation in Philippines. This is a foundation in Philippines, and as Ottawa appointed Senior Program Officer of International Development Research Center, Canada. He was managed ICT 4D research grant in Asia. Having launched India's first ever news index system, Express, in 1991, while serving the Indian Express newspaper group, and thereafter he first ever developed a news portal in 1999. He launched the first global anti-corruption portal, first ever global anti-corruption portal, CORIS, at the International Anti-Corruption Conference in Seoul in 2003. And Transparency International's Internet Chapter Zone as knowledge management platform for TI's Transparency International's national chapters in 92 countries in the same year. Professor Shadrak, while managing the Building Communication Opportunities Alliance in Asia in 2004, launched Ek Dunia Ek Awaaz, a unique community radio initiative and a multi-stakeholder alliance of over 600 organizations that advocated for the achieving the MDGs of South Asia. He supported the launch of South Asia's Vadana Todo campaign together with United Nations MDG campaign partners, while also managing the Open Knowledge Network in Asia on behalf of G8's dot force. In the year 2005, the support from Cisco and British Telecom, he launched Lifeline India, the nation's first ever NGO-led 24/7 farmers call center. Professor Shadrach, between 2003 and 2005, he was global coordinator for Grassroots Caucus at both legs of the World Summit on the Information Society in Geneva and Tunis. Under the chairmanship of Professor M.S. Swaminathan, as Executive Secretary, he launched Mission 2007, Every Village a Knowledge Center initiative, which paved the way for establishing over 1 lakh common service centers in India. He helped to spread its adaptation in many nations around the world. Further, as a global head, telecom.org, telecenter.org Academy, in 2009, he developed a unique training ecosystem for equipping grassroots knowledge workers, grassroots level knowledge workers. After successfully established global telecom.org, telecenter.org Foundation in Manila 2010, with the support from ITU in 2011, he launched the worldwide Telecenter for Women, and that trained almost 1 million women in digital entrepreneurship. In 2015, again, he launched the Indian Public Library Movement in partnership with BMGF and NASCOM Foundation and South Asian INELI program in 2007 in partnership with MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. As skill advisor at the Commonwealth of Learning in 2019 and 20, he in collaboration with Udemy, Coursera, and Google, he implemented job-ready skill among 2 lakh people in Asia. In Asia, Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific during COVID-19 pandemic to help them re-enter into labor market. During his 37-year-long professional life, Dr. Shadrach has also consulted for FCDO UK, ITU Geneva, ADB the Philippines, UNDP Iraq, Practical Action UK, the Open University UK, Article 19 UK, and the ICT Agency of Sri Lanka, and several other agencies and countries. He earned his PhD in Information and Library Science as faculty student from, I am adding, Andhra University, and as a faculty student from Labour University of UK. He was awarded with honorary professorship by Sir Padampat Singhania University, Sir Padampat Singhania University, India, in November 2002. I think this time we have identified, the university has identified a right person who is really trying to lead ODL institutions and ODL system into a new platform and with a new vision and direction. Thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and thank you for coming over to Hyderabad to deliver Professor G. Ram Reddy Memorial Lecture. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Professor Chakrapani, for your detailed introduction of the chief guest of this day. And really, as I said, he is most suitable person to deliver this lecture today. Because of his experience, international exposure in different organizations, and spreading the ODL system and supporting it, and contributing for its expansion through various measures. Now, I request Professor Bashir Ahmed Chatterjee to deliver his lecture on the said topic of Open Universities and Education 4.0. Thank you very much.
Point presentation.
Yeah, it is. To కూర్చోవాలంటే సీట్లు లేవు.
Yeah, yeah, we can talk.
రద్దు చేసుకున్నాం సార్.
Thank you, Professor Sitharama Garu. It's my privilege to be here on your invitation. Thank you so much for inviting me and also being so patient. It's part of the delay that was mentioned about the conduct of this event was me. So my apologies. I had to wait until my new president taking over in Vancouver to make this event. Otherwise, we would have had this in the first 10 days of December. That's the custom, I understand, around the birthday of Professor Ram Reddy on the 4th of December. My salutation to Srimati Pamila Ram Reddy. Thank you for being with us and thank you for your continuous partnership with Dr. Brau, with the trust. And Srimati Jyoti, who has joined us from the family. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, Professor Haragopal, for leading this trust and also now bringing the trust closer to the university. I'm sure Professor Reddy will be, from heaven, he will be really pleased that such a thing is happening. Thank you, Professor Venkaya, Professor Venkataya, former registrar, and Professor Ganta Chakrapani, who is the director of academics here in the university, and the registrar, Dr. Reddy. Thank you for your presence here. And I would like to also thank the students as well as the faculty members who are assembled here today to perhaps, Professor Ram Reddy has been one of those individuals whose birthday as well as the death anniversary are celebrated so quite widely in our country. When IGNOU celebrates in the month of July, Hyderabad, Dr. Ambedkar Open University celebrates in the month of December, which is phenomenal. I do not think that any other personality in the open and distance learning domain has had this love, affection shown by his successes. And I'm sure this will continue for a longer period of time. And in this, the role played by Dr. Ambedkar Open University and the Memorial Trust and many other institutions like IGNOU, NAC and others would be very eminent. Now we are gathered here to celebrate this Dr. Ram Reddy's time in terms of as to how he enabled things to happen in this world. And as for the agenda, I thought I would speak to these few points in the next 25-30 minutes. Of course, tributes have been paid to Professor Ram Reddy, but I would also like to pay my own tribute from his alma mater, which is the Commonwealth of Learning. I can also speak to the open learning journey, and there is an elaborate most printed booklet on which you can read, but I'll touch upon the various phases of open and distance learning, particularly in our country, because globally, if you look at the open and distance learning, India has been the prime mover. Although many other countries are also embracing open and distance learning, the majority of open universities and open institutions are in India. So I'll touch upon some of the progressions that happen, but also talk to the current types of open universities in India, particularly emanating from the recent consortium that is being attempted at under the leadership of people like Dr. Professor K.C. Karamagaru and others. And I'll speak to the Education 4.0 framework, which is going to be very different from the kind of Education 4.0 rhetoric that we hear quite a lot in other parts of the world. But finally, I will conclude in terms of how open universities could be a party to implementing Education 4.0. So I think I would like to start with submitting that perhaps this page requires to be multiplied. And I'm sure there are quite a lot of people, enthusiastic people, who would like to add to the Wikipedia, which is a very democratic, editable page. So Professor Ramreddy deserves at least 10 pages of colors, which could be added. But interestingly, only 2 lines are written about him. What I understand about Professor Ramreddy is 29 years ago, as was mentioned, his sudden passing at a very early young age of 65 came out as a very big shock for the entire world. And that too after he received a new meritorious award that was constituted by my own organization, Commonwealth of Learning, together with the International Council for Distance Education. And he was in England, in the UK, to receive this award. And after a few days of receiving this award, unfortunately, God had other plans. He took him to his abode. But rising from a level of being a person from a small village in this part of the world to becoming the first vice president of the Commonwealth of Learning, the organization I represent, is really a huge transition. And it's a testament to his caliber. No doubt, he continues to be known as the father of the Indian ODL landscape. And in this effort, after having become very young first vice chancellor of his own alma mater, Osmania University, at the age of 48, as mentioned by Professor Karagopal, his heart was towards open and distance learning. And I understand that I used to call you and have discussions around this. And with the help of the leadership then, Rao and others, the first open university in India was established here. And this is his Karambhumi, and I'm really privileged to be addressing this August gathering from this place. And after establishing the first state national open university, he went on to establishing the first national open university in Delhi. And then he went on to becoming a key proponent of the Asian Association of Open Universities, and thereafter to the International Council for Distance Education, and by being also as the first founding vice president of Commonwealth of Learning. These are all very huge privilege that we feel as Paul we will be able to achieve over a period of time, because his services really shaped up how Paul also functioned over a period of time. Now, there are other things about Professor Reddy, including the his association with NAC and others, which you are all aware of. But I think what is noteworthy is, somebody who has had the vision, and I'm sure if God permitted him to continue in this world for another 2 or 3 decades, it would have really shaped up open education landscape. And the discourse that I'm going to have, Education 4.0, is something that he would have really appreciated, I would hope. Because, open universities have evolved from Dr. Ram Reddy's time to something very, very agile, which he also saw when he was alive. Open to online, distance to digital. We have blended HyFlex, what they call hybrid and flexible learning practices, but also heavy use of technology. And now Professor Chakrapani mentioned about artificial intelligence as something that is coming. So Professor Reddy, I think it would be where to pay any special tribute to Professor Ram Reddy. I think his vision of taking open and distance learning to the masses is something that we could recommit and rededicate our lives to. So that's something that is very, very important for us. Now, as I was mentioning, I wanted to walk with you some sort of a progression that had happened since the 1960s, when we call the first era of the so-called open and distance learning systems, generally in India and across the world. That was when, aligned with the vision of Professor Ram Reddy, the Labour government in the UK first conceptualized the Open University in the UK in the 1960s. And the Labour government's agenda was people from all backgrounds, as was mentioned by Professor Haragopal. All backgrounds should have access to higher education and to be cost effective. Interestingly, in a democratic society like the UK, where the opponents have equal voice, the shadow cabinet, what they call, they said when they recognized the open university system to be cost effective, they also said it's very expensive. And interestingly today, if you look at the cost of education in the UK, open university education is not cost effective. In the sense it's sometimes more expensive, but more loud, more taken up. So on one hand, this kind of discourse that happened in the House of Commons about the cost effectiveness vis-a-vis expensive education is something that continues even today in the UK, where people are willing to take bank loans to pursue education through the open university in the UK because they see a value in such an education. And this was 1960s, when the Indian systems also here, the first correspondence program was introduced in Delhi University in 1962, followed by many institutes of correspondence studies in the 60s and 70s, which led to basically enabling institutions to come up with a liberalized formula of education. In the sense, not straight-jacketed. When the British left, of course, there were only a handful of students, but this took us to the next trajectory, where tertiary education and certification was something that was linked directly to the economic aspirations of individuals and the societal needs, demand for more skilled people in society. But it didn't stop with the institutes of correspondence studies. That's where I think Professor Ram Reddy had a real vision, a new vision, where he could create an open education system for the invisible learner. Quite often you have visible learners in your four walls, within your four walls. But I think the premise with which the Open University, the first Open University was formed in Madhya Pradesh, was on the basis that we as academics have the ability to create material for that invisible learner and provide support system to the invisible learner. This was the first era of open education system. And followed by Andhra Pradesh, as you know, IGNOU, Nalanda, Rajasthan in Kota, in Rajasthan, and of course Maharashtra and Nasik. They all followed suit, and they initiated the open universities. And the hallmark of the first era of open universities, which continues even today, and which is also the aspiration of the Memorial Trust, is OUs should cater to the diverse set of learners. Young, old, full-time, part-time, those who are work, those who are out of work, able, disabled, formal, flexible. So all sorts of learners were embraced, and that's the hallmark of Professor Ram Reddy. And I think we have to salute him for that level of orientation at a very early time when education was an opportunity for the privileged. And I think he brought it closer to the next generation. But that said, the second era, soon after some of these universities got formed in the mid-1980s, the 2 decades, a short kind of an era, embraced what you call the radio and television medium. You had this invasion of beyond material and support system, which was the foundation of the first era. They also took advantage of the radio and so all India radio broadcast in 16 languages through 14 stations, education programs. INSAT 1B was introduced on the national network. You had channels that promoted national country classrooms and so on. Some of you may be remembering Professor Yashpal and others who steered this moment for a period of time. So the open education to the masses actually reduced the pressure on the conventional universities. And the objective was to, at that time, as was mentioned earlier, to provide the second chance education to people who may have discontinued from the formal system. And this is where the notion of lifelong learning also started. The second era was the birth of what they call the diversification of degrees into diploma courses and certificate programs, but also leading to lifelong learning. So education was not confined to only 3-year graduation and 2-year post-graduation. It was beginning to relax itself to introducing other forms of lifelong education opportunities. But it was also an innovation. At that time, the first innovation after the TV and radio promotion, we also found a system where people could learn at their own pace. The eligibility criteria were actually looked into closely and relaxed. We also have some beginning to the assessment reforms at this time. And then during this second era of the 4.2 million higher education pursuants, almost 1 million was from the correspondence and open education system. And the third era, what I call, is something that where we see open universities and open education systems going global. There has been a move, the Daniel report, John Daniel famous report, proposed the establishment of a global institution. And that's where Professor Ram Reddy will go as the first vice president of the Commonwealth of Learning. So the Daniel report actually proposed 2 things. One, information service to all ODL practitioners around the world from Milton Keynes in the UK, and ODL global institutions set up in Vancouver as Commonwealth of Learning. And that's when the heads of governments, and the Indian government was represented by Sri Rajiv Gandhi then, who gathered together in Vancouver, ended up in creating Commonwealth of Learning, a global institution in 1987. And that was the beginning of something going really global, really big. And just imagine, person who hailed from a small village in Andhra Pradesh, ending up to be the global leader as the vice president. And the role of the vice president, by the way, in Commonwealth of Learning is extremely a powerful role, an executive role, a role that takes the idea forward to the global institution. And that was Professor Ram Reddy in his early days. And he was instrumental in many other things that happened thereafter. And I would think that the Halifax statement, which emerged in November 2000, was a kind of a watershed moment in the third year of ODL, where in a collaborative manner at a global level, there was attempt to really tackle resources for learning because we had rich experience, and Professor Ram Reddy was one of those early proponents who knew that learning resources were so rich for that invisible learner. Standards and equivalencies, issues around improvements in programs. They also noted that, as again was mentioned, small states, and the globe has a large number of small states, and they recognize that small states also need education, and they around that time HIV/AIDS pandemic, so they also embraced awareness programs, and they spoke about a range of issues, fellowship programs to introduction of ICTs to teacher development to professional development and so on. So Halifax statement became a reality when under the chairmanship, under the leadership of Professor Ram Reddy and others who followed suit, ended up establishing, when I mentioned small states, they established a virtual university for small states of the Commonwealth, which came out as a reality. And they also recognized that the global collaboration that they talked about in Halifax should need to be complemented by establishing regional centers. So they established regional centers in Nigeria, in Botswana, Malta, in the Pacific, in Fiji, and also that was the time SEMCA, the organization that I work, was established. Again, thanks to the visionary leadership of Professor Ram Reddy and people like Professor Abdul Wahid Khan and others, SEMCA became a reality. The Indian government, which established CALL in Vancouver, chose to establish a regional center in Delhi called SEMCA. And once they brought in all these players together and also noted that material development, quality-based material development and resource sharing was important, together with UNESCO, there was this proposition of open education resources community. The OER movement came to fore. The Paris Declaration is a kind of an underlying discussion, and Paris Declaration, again with Professor Wahid Khan, enabled what we call open education resources community to come. The first documents for UNESCO and Commonwealth learning. And the Paris Declaration was followed by the Ljubljana Convention thereafter, and you see the OER movement come up. And in the third era, we also witnessed the Kuala Lumpur Declaration of 2016, where they gave a lot of emphasis. Being Malaysians who followed all the time the Singaporean model, they brought in the dimension of education and innovation in the culture of ODL. And you would also imagine around that time, the three world leaders put together the Sustainable Development Goals. So ODL also took note of Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 4 and 5. So this was the third era. Now let us look at the fourth era. Fourth era is very, very interesting an era. I'm not even touching upon artificial intelligence, which is part of the fourth era. And for convenience sake, keeping it aside, but I'm going to look at in the fourth era of this open university system, we have COVID. COVID was the main player. After SDGs, and we all, as 200 and odd governments, pursued SDG 4, SDG 5, SDG 8, and education as foundation for achieving all the 17 such sustainable development goals. We were at a crossroad where we found COVID actually disrupting. And interestingly, COVID also did what we could not do for 30 years, pushing the ODL agenda to the world. And naturally, organically, people took on emergency remote teaching. So ERT became a kind of mantra. And globally, we saw a lot of things happening. And EdTech companies around this point in time only were also becoming agile, and they took advantage. And as was mentioned earlier, I was happy to be a part of promoting during the COVID times education to skill development of about 200,000 people. And every 10th person in the state of Guyana, the country of Guyana, was a student at that point in time. Just imagine an island nation with little limited connectivity, but they were able to, even during the COVID times, use open and distance learning to learn and become sustainable. Now, that's the first, major disruption that happened. The fourth era, the second major disruption, the positive disruption, is the NEP 2020. And now Professor Sita Ramagaru and others who are at the helm of affairs in terms of taking NEP 2020 to the masses and turning that into a reality. And I would like to touch upon some aspects of some of the things that Professor Sita Ramagaru and others started to do in the form of what we call the Ahmedabad Declaration. They all met together in August last year as university vice chancellors. You have 17 open universities in our country, and you have one national university. All the universities came together and they said that this is the time for us to take charge. For two reasons. The trend that was witnessed in the second era that I mentioned, out of 4.5 million students then, 1 million was from the open and distance learning. Even today, of the 40 million students in the higher education domain, more than 4.7 million come from the open and distance learning. Just imagine 18 universities on one side, you have 1,100 universities, 45,000 colleges, 10,000 independent institutions. On the other side, producing 89% of higher education enrollment, and just 18 universities on this side. And that's the vision, and that's the tribute I think the world is paying to Professor Ram Reddy, the man who really believed that open and distance learning is possible. Today we are doing it, even today. 11% of the 40 million students who are studying in India are through the open and distance learning system. Now the government of India, through the NEP and other targets, have envisioned that 50% gross enrollment ratio would be achieved by 2035, which means the current 40 million students would become 80 million students in 2035. Who is the answer? Open and distance learning. Professor Ram Reddy's vision is the answer. And that's the reason why the 18 university vice chancellors got together and they said, let's do something. Let's not only look at enhancing the GER from current 29% to 50% by 2035, but let's do three things differently. The first thing is, let's infuse quality in education. Now, the hallmark of open universities, right from the material base, was the quality or the invisible learning, and they rewatch for quality. Then they said we would also go to places where the other systems do not. We'll go to the remotest parts, we'll go to the nook and corners of the country, but we'll go to the disadvantaged community, in prison, transgender community, and people who are deprived of education for a longer period of time. And in a society like India, where structures also played an important role in the way education was provided, now Professor Ram Reddy's vision is much more closer to people who otherwise would not have really mainstreamed the education domain. So, NEP 2020 and COVID were the disruptions. And if you look at NEP, it talks about a range of things. And it is asking for us to, for the education system to develop systems that would help learners to have 21st century skills, that would help learners to have a capable and rational thought of action, who would possess compassion, who would have empathy, who would have courage, who would have resilience, who would have scientific temper, who would have creative imagination, who would have very sound ethical morals and values. Now, education is not getting degrees. Education is about ethical values. Education is about global citizenship. Education is about compassion, empathy, this is what NEP 2020 is promoting. And in this context, I want to really look into the role that open universities could play. Now, let me quickly run through the Ahmedabad Declaration. Now, Ahmedabad Declaration is again yet another watershed moment in the history of ODL. That the 18 vice chancellors committed to, number one, achieving the sustainable development goals. Globally, every country is regressing in achieving every SDG. Let alone SDG 4, which directly speaks to quality education for the marginalized. So the vice chancellors committed themselves to SDG 4, but also SDG 5, which talks about gender equality, gender equity, SDG 8, which talks about decent work and remunerative employment and entrepreneurship. So this is something that the vice chancellors committed themselves to. The second thing that they committed themselves to ensuring that their universities won't only teach subject disciplines, but inculcate 21st century skills amongst the learners. So this is a huge shift from the traditional outlook. The third commitment of the vice chancellors at in Ahmedabad was that we'll scale up education, but also include the excluded, as I mentioned earlier. They said we would not only look at the formal learners, we would also look at informal learners. So skilling, reskilling, upskilling would be our mantra, not just the catchment. The natural catchment is those who are second chance. But now by putting reskilling, upskilling, and skilling, what cleverly these vice chancellors have done, Professor Sitaram Garu and others, that the so-called second chance has now become first chance. There is open and distance learning is the first chance for many people who would like to reskill themselves, upskill themselves. There is a huge opportunity facing open and distance learning. And they recommitted themselves to quality because if you look at the education per se, the material that open universities develop is of extreme high quality. Where they perhaps fail is the student support services. And that interface is something that we need to build on. There are other systems, and not only automation and computing that would come into fore, but also artificial intelligence enabled bots and virtual tutors and whatnot that's discussed can be in the future. Then they said we'll start sharing resources because resources are very important. So they committed to sharing resources. And the economy also said that let's begin the credit transfer framework, which is very well articulated through the Academic Bank of Credits, ABC, in the NEP 2020, is something that they would live up to. So there is an interest and enthusiasm amongst the open universities to transfer credits and redeem credits. So that framework that they committed. And they also said that if nobody else understands blended learning, we understand blended learning. Open and distance learning institutions have practiced blended learning for a long time. And if you look at NEP, the essence of NEP, if anybody would want me to talk about NEP in 2 words, I'll say blended learning. That's what NEP 2020 is about. And ODL, open universities, are the 4 runners of the blended learning system. But they also said, let's as much we embrace artificial intelligence, complementing human intelligence, bringing in AI in educational practice. We'll also embrace radio. We'll also embrace the poor man's technology. You see, even the OU in the UK, although it's an open university, distance university, has started face-to-face classes. Even IGNOU has started face-to-face classes. And finally, they said that we would be innovative and creative. This is Ahmedabad Declaration. And very much aligned, agile to the changing times, not only to increase the quantity of higher education uptake, but the quality of higher education uptake. So this is very noteworthy for me because I want to quickly introduce this notion called Education 4.0. Education 4.0 can mean many things to many people. Oftentimes what would happen Web 1.0 may be equivalent to education 1.0. People would correlate education 4.0 with web 4.0 or industrial revolution 4.0. What is it, IR 4.0? It's the convergence of physical, digital, and biological. Very interesting concept, but that's what IR 4.0 is. Physical world, digital world, and biological world, wearable computing. All this coming together is what IR 4.0, like largely perpetuated by machine learning, data analytics, and now generative AI, the algorithms that both big companies as well as the app developers are using are leading us to predictive content generation, predictive support. So the Alexas of the world are becoming much more agile. And today we are talking about, Khan Academy is talking about Khanmigo, a tutor, a Coursera coach, or many of these edtech companies are promising that every individual would have a digital twin who would be coaching this individual. So this is the world we are going into. And that India becoming the chair of the Global Partnership of AI, and I am privileged to be part of the steering committee, is very much optimistic about the whole thing, where we, some of us, like the academics, are asking them to take a step back by saying that, are we ethical? Can we produce ethical AI, responsible AI, and responsive AI, so that the human agency takes the first seat? So that's one sort of a notion of education 4.0. But the education 4.0 that I am talking about is a different notion. The human agency notion, the notion that NEP 2020 promotes, the notion the Open Vice Chancellors promoted, which is rooted squarely in this framework that the WEF, World Economic Forum, has come up with. And you can see that, I don't know if it's big enough for you to see, I can read out. It's on the one side of the frame, it talks about global citizenship skills, it talks about innovation and creativity skills, it talks about technology skills, it talks about interpersonal skills on one side. On the other side, it talks about personalized and self-paced learning approaches, it talks about accessible and inclusive learning styles, it talks about problem-based and collaborative learning styles, it talks about lifelong learning and student-driven learning. This has nothing to do with AI, right? It's all about human agency. And if we believe that the role that education system could do to the humanity is to make the human the superior element, and the artificial intelligence the subservient serving agent. If we do not do it today, it would be the other way around. AI will take over you, like the factory incident that was mentioned. Now AI would understand you to be a parcel or a consignment and throw it in the conveyor belt. What we need to do as education is to take one step up our game in terms of moving towards strengthening the human agency. Today, every statistic says that a large number of our students who come out of the education system are not employable. They do not have the skills. They do not have the competencies to collaborate. They do not have critical thinking skills. They do not have creativity. Infosys and other IT companies have to unschool them. They have to take them off the school and put them in a kind of a chamber and ask them, forget everything. Now, let's begin. And it's not just India, globally, everywhere. And interestingly, very many developed countries have taken this notion, that idea forward, Europe in particular. They've taken it very seriously. And what I am trying to emphasize on the day of Professor Ram Reddy's memorial lecture today is to focus on the human agency, focus on these skills. Education 4.0 framework is all about global citizenship skills. It's not about inward looking. the more that we inward look, the more we will be forced to look up. We need to have every sixth person in areas, every sixth person in the world is an Indian. And we have to be having the global outlook rather than the Indian outlook. Of course, we want to cherish the Indianness, our roots, everything, but we also have to be willing to go out as global citizens. We have to have innovation and creativity skills. We have to have interpersonal skills and technology skills. There are, as we speak, greening is happening, digitalization is happening all over the world, and we need to prep ourselves. Just one skill, collaborative and problem-solving skill on the other side. There is an estimation that if we invest in one skill, collaborative problem-solving skill, it can add to $2.54 trillion to the GDP, global GDP. Just one skill, just focus on it. Who will do it other than the educationists? Who can do it better than the educationists? And 10% of them are in your hands. And with the Ahmedabad Declaration, you are making it 20%. So 20% of your Indian learners are in your hands. So there is a huge opportunity. Now, I want to quickly mention about these skills in a bit more in a detailed manner. Again, I'm sorry about the small print. Now, what we are talking about in terms of the global citizenship skills to the innovation and creativity skills, technology skills, and interpersonal skills, you can further take this into things like abilities and skills in one bucket. You can also look at attitudes and values in another bucket. And the third bucket is what you are really, really good at. Subject discipline skills, knowledge transfer. What as professors we have ages past have done is transferring knowledge. Transferring knowledge about physics, chemistry, or any topic we have transferred, we are really good at it. Even today, discipline-based education is important in our system. But two things that are to be brought to the attention of the educationists are the ability and skills and attitudes and values. And what are we talking about? When we are talking about creativity, we are talking about an iterative process that enables somebody to innovate and think across disciplines and domains. And it's so worthwhile for us to try this out because all universities are becoming multidisciplinary and also interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary is one step forward from multidisciplinary. Now, when we are encouraged to become multidisciplinary, we have the ability as teachers to bring in the creativity in people to think beyond the domains and the disciplines and imagine novel solutions to meaningful problems. That's where transdisciplinary comes into play. Critical thinking, from deductive reasoning to infer logical conclusion to inductive reasoning for inferring generic conclusion. These are all the things that as educators we are best suited to do. We are best suited to do in terms of preparing our students to think critically so that they can detect and induct and generalize as well as go further deeper into systems so that they can think about hypothetical scenarios to real. When it comes to digital skills and programming skills, it's important that everyone understands coding, everyone understands the implications of AI, everyone understands the ethical use of AI and responsible conduct as a citizen. When it comes to problem solving, there is a need for us to break down the complex problems into simple ideas so that we can solve. Where could people gain all these skills? It's in the universities. Systems analysis to collaboration, to coordinate with other individuals. That's one of the major problems today that we see in the personalized world where people are hooked up to, personalized devices. So there is a need for us to bring in people to collaborate, talk to each other, and university systems have to render its services towards them. Communication becomes extremely important. A lot of conflicts are solved through communication, but also a lot of concepts can be clearly articulated through communication. And we need our students who come out of the university system to communicate with, not just in written form, but also verbally. They should be able to negotiate with. They should have social awareness around them. And they should also have balance and coordination. Sometimes, I see a lot of chemistry students here where balance, coordination, and positional awareness, all these issues come into focus. Because, that's your job. You may not really think that that's a skill that you are honing in the chemistry labs and physics labs and so on. So that's one set of, idea that what we call abilities. But equally so, it is important for us to have attitudes in all. A major problem in our society is lack of attitude, adaptability. We don't want to adapt to other conditions. We still want to be in that sas bahu and this kind of conflicts. We cannot. So it's important that university systems enable people to confront with issues, but also become comfortable with dealing with difficulties. Adaptability is important. Consciousness and diligence, honesty, ownership, responsibility, accountability, these are all factors that we need the students to have, combined with curiosity. Now, not simply listening to something, but experiencing, verifying facts, and becoming openness to explore, discovering new ideas. We also need the students to have grit, passion, but also resilience when it comes to facing adversities. Because people run away. If there is a boss is very, very kind of authoritative boss, I want to run away, I want to resign and move away. That's not the case. You have to have that grit in order to actually persevere. First business, something went wrong, I want to close down my business and run away. Grit. And this is what we need to teach amongst our students. Growth mindset. Growth mindset, not only economic growth, it's also about taking risks and perceiving, willing to take risks and willing to fail, but also at the end of the day, moving away from that inflated ego to something that you would very painstakingly pursue. And there is also civic responsibility from part and parcel of the attitudes and values. Environmental stewardship. We talked about greening. Everywhere greening is happening, and every citizen has to lend his or her hand to greening efforts. So, what is the stewardship? Are we leaving the world tomorrow for our children? A different world that is difficult to live, or a world that is worthy enough for them to live? And we mentioned about empathy and kindness. So this is, according to me, is education 4.0. And this is not about artificial intelligence. It's not about technology. It's all about human agency. How do we relive the vision of the visionaries who wanted the marginalized to gather education, but for a purpose? The purpose is not just finding jobs. Purpose is not just earning some money. Purpose is education 4.0. So I want to read out this. Effective learning requires a comprehensive approach that involves appropriate curriculum. You can all relate with this. Engaging pedagogy. You can all relate with this. Continuous formative assessment. You can relate with this. Adequate student support. This is what you have lived your life through. But the curriculum must be interesting. Question mark. Because we need to really make it interesting, relevant, updated, regularly to align with the latest knowledge requirements to meet the specific learning outcomes. Learning outcomes today, it's not just about having the competence in that specific knowledge discipline. Learning outcomes is attitudes, values, abilities, skills. So we need to actually realign our notion of learning objectives and learning outcomes. And to create high quality pedagogy that is necessary to impart material to students and determine the learning experience or directly influencing certain things. What are these? Capacities that promote student wellness, fitness, good health, social well-being, sound ethical grounding, and critical for high quality learning. This is what NEP 2020 is talking about. Then I want to repeat another quote and perhaps stop here. OU faculty members should know, in my view, how to embed Education 4.0 in their curriculum. How do we embed these abilities, skills, attitudes, and values in our curriculum? It's possible. And that's what Education 4.0 is about. In your teaching and learning practices, in your workplace-based learning practices, apprenticeship learning practices, or in your efforts towards creating the school teachers, because higher education is creating the school system. You are preparing the teachers of those who teach in schools. So you have a major influential role in order to impart education to the learners through the innovative methods, processes, products that you come up with, and the delivery mechanisms. And I want to repeat this. The abilities and skills that are largely defined as cognitive, social, and physical, leading to acquiring the following skills in the long run. When it comes to cognitive, what we impart as cognitive skills lead them to develop further skills like creativity, critical thinking, digital skills, programming, problem solving, systems analysis. So this is the cognitive skills that we are imparting, and we need to really take a concerted attempt to embed these in our teaching and learning material and systems. When it comes to social skills that we impart as educators, we are imparting communication skills, negotiation skills, socio-emotional awareness. And when it comes to physical skills, as I mentioned, balance, coordination, positional awareness, and strength. And then we are looking at attitude and values, where we are looking at intrapersonal skills and extrapersonal skills. Intrapersonal skills enable them to adapt, being conscious, curious, grit, with growth mindset and take initiative. When it comes to extrapersonal skills, it talks about civic responsibility, environmental stewardship, empathy, kindness, global citizenship. So just to sum up what I mentioned the last 35 minutes, we looked at Professor Ram Reddy's vision. We looked at the open and distance learning, how it has progressed thus far. We looked at open universities in the current times in the prism of Professor Sitharama Garu and his counterparts who represent all of you. We looked at Education 4.0 framework, which is all about human agency. We looked at how open universities respond to it. Thank you so much.
So, thank you very much, sir, for your collaborative and analytical and thought-provoking lecture pushed to the present context. And we have received it very well. And really we have brought together the Ahmedabad Declaration of Vice Chancellors and also the conceptual framework of educational 4.0. So the most emphasis on human agency or human beings, not on the physical and digital skills. So I feel the skills and attitudes, values, always these things are always ahead in any history. That is the reason we go forward. So these skills should be always kept as a, if you say education 4.0, physical and digital skills. And if you say human related skills are education, knowledge, or whatever, it is 5.0. The leadership of education institutions must have the mindset of 5.0, not 4.0. Then only, and people like Professor Ram Reddy in history, for the point of time, he gave a different turn to the education system in our India. So is the case. So if you want to go forward again, the leadership, education leadership of the higher education institutions must be in advance. They must have a larger framework and a flexibility in leadership parties. Take forward the institutions and also education system as a whole. So, sir, that is my observation as a presidential closing remarks, whatever it is. And before the formal vote of thanks of this session, we have a practice of felicitating the chief guest on this occasion, every lecture, at the end of every lecture. So now I request our chief guest of the state to accept our small felicitations, and I request our PRO, Venugopal Reddy, to conduct this felicitations event, and then later it will be, lastly, vote of thanks will be proposed by Dr. A.V.N. Reddy, Registrar of our university. Thank you very much. Now I request A.V.N. Reddy.
Respected dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. So today, chief guest, Dr. Bashir Ahmed Shadrack, Director Commonwealth Educational Media Center. Sir, on behalf of university and my own behalf of, we are very, very much thankful to you for sparing the valuable time and a very experienced person in the field of open distance learning education. And also, today, President of the function, Mr. Sitaram Rao, Vice Chancellor of this university. So thank you very much for sparing valuable time here. And also the trust secretary, Professor Hargopalji. Very much thankful, sir, for continuing collaborating the activities which are run by this university with you. And also the family members of the Professor Ram Reddy Garu, both Pramila Ram Reddy and as well as the Chief Ram Reddy, both have been here present from starting from the function. So on behalf of the university, we are very much thankful to you, ma'am. And also the Director Academic, Professor Kanta Chakrapan Garu, here, and also introduced the chief guest as well as the explained about the program of the Ram Reddy Memorial Lecture. And also that one, the President, Professor Venkaya Garu, former Vice Chancellor and former Professor of the Ambedkar University, and also Professor Venkaya Garu, Professor Masal Reddy, and the directors, the deans, faculty members, non-teaching staff, as well as students, as well as scholars. So all of them who are here and online also. Some of them have been joined in June. So on behalf of the university and on my own behalf, again, thankful to you and each and every one who are behind this program for success, grand success, making grand success. Thank you, thank you.